In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, we had to split this episode into two parts. So this is part two of Leif Thulin's top 10 prospects. Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. In this case, it's your second listen of the day because this is part two of Leaf's top 10. And before we get into the second half of this two-part series, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by the college football playoffs. The college football playoff is here, and you don't want to miss a moment of the action. The college football playoff is presented by Allstate and begins with 4 first-round games on December 20th and 21st. You can catch the action on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and Max. Also, check out the Locked On newsletter. Your favorite Locked On NBA podcast has a newsletter that will be delivered right to your inbox. So check it out at lockedondaily.com. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe, like, share, comment, click the bell so you can be notified every time we drop an episode because we are coming at you 5 days per week. All right, in the first episode, we talked about Leafs' top 5 prospects. Start off with Cooper Flagg. Dylan Harper comes in at number 2. Trey Johnson, the freshman from Texas, at number 3. Kasparas Yakachonis, the freshman at Illinois, was at number 4. And at number 5 was Ace Bailey. All right, and we'll start this episode off with Jeremiah Fears. Jeremiah Fears has been one of the biggest risers in this college basketball season so far. You are, along with me and James, have Jeremiah Fears as a top 10 pick. I love the speed. The youth just turned 18 in October, but the speed, the size, the creativity, I'm a big fan. Tell me your thoughts on Fears and why you have him in your top 10.
I mean, I'll give you some context here for those listening. Jeremiah Fears is a guy who went to Oklahoma, was projected in the bottom 3 teams of the SEC, which may be the best league there's ever been. All 16 teams in the SEC are in the top 68 of KenPom. 68 teams comprise the NCAA tournament. Like, that's pretty astounding. Well, anyway, Oklahoma's undefeated, won the battle for Atlantis, and Jeremiah Fears is the largest reason why, along with Porter Moser, who's an X's and O's savant. He's averaging 17 points per game, 5 assists, 4 rebounds, shooting 48% from the field. I think he's the type of guy that no matter what situation you put him in as an 18-year-old, which once again is very impressive against some of these older players, will be able to manufacture good shots for both himself and his teammates. And while I think his numbers will regress once he goes into SEC play and his team's record will start to tail off a little bit, I think he's going to always impress by the way he's able to create looks for himself and others by navigating pick and roll, by being fast, getting to the rim, drawing fouls, shooting free throws. He hits off the dribble shots. He's able to spot up. I like everything about his game, and I think he's actually a pretty decent defender for someone who's just turned 18 as well.
Yep. All right, here's a question for you. You have Nolan Traore underneath him. In your opinion, and it's easy to look at Traore's struggles. We're talking about Nolan Traore, projected top 5 pick coming into the year by pretty much every scout that I talked to. Had a very strong spring and summer, and over in France has struggled this year. And I'm a little bit down on him, but I watched his film earlier this morning, and I see the flashes. So with that being said, if Fears and Traore switched roles, and Traore was playing college basketball and Fears was playing over in France, do you think that we would view them differently?
Yes, I do. I mean, we talked about this with Jaden Hardy, where he would have been a top 5 pick probably if he didn't go play in the G League and was inefficient playing professional basketball, but was the number 3 recruit overall and a gifted scorer. So I do think that point has merit. But my concern is that in professional basketball, you get a taste, at least an entree into where the weaknesses get further exposed. And he hasn't cleaned up those weaknesses too much. He has flashes. He was excellent in various all-star level games and events. and he was sensational. And I was thinking maybe this guy is better than Harper coming in. I didn't have that much faith that Harper was better than a guy playing professional basketball, but I just don't know if it would adjust to the lack of spacing where he's already not shooting particularly well. I think he'd be one of the best players in collegiate basketball. I have no doubts about that. And I think if you made the swap, we'd be talking about Traore more confidently. But those that we've talked about having played professional basketball, but then they're viewed poorly or less well than they previously were regarded, those have been true indicators of to follow. Like those players haven't performed as well as you maybe would think, even though they would be far more efficient and viewed in a more positive light if they'd played college basketball.
Yeah, because I look at Yakachonis and Egor Demin, who we'll talk about next. The move to college basketball, along with their professional experience, I think in a sense has helped them out. While Traore he's really struggling. He's always had some issues finishing at the rim. He's at about 55% at the rim, which is, I mean, it's not terrible. It's about average, but for a guy that his bread and butter, in a sense, is his rim pressure, that's a little bit concerning. All right, let's switch to Egor Demin. All right, quick question for you. You are in Utah, and I know the buzz around BYU is pretty high right now. Which Egor Demin do you think is the Egor that we're going to see the remainder of the year? The guy that feasted off of weaker competition the first 4 games of the year, and I would say 5, but he didn't really get off against Mississippi Valley State in his 5th game, or the Egor that struggled a little bit or struggled a lot against Providence, but struggled against Ole Miss and NC State. Which one do you think is the real version of Egor? Do you think he falls somewhere in the middle?
I think he became overrated because of, oh my gosh, this guy's 6'8" and zips passes that no one else could dream about. So therefore, he's Luka. Like Kasparis plays far more similarly to Luka than Egor, but Egor had those big time games, and no one can shake that out of their mind. And he's exciting, and AJ DeBots is coming to that program. I think you're going to see more similarities to the games against Providence because the Big 12 is a rugged defensive league. And I think Egor Demin became overrated because his shooting looked good against the inferior athleticism. And I believe his shooting is going to regress to the mean, which I think is a slight concern. That said, I think he's the best passer in this class, even over Kasparis Yakachonis. I just think that his lack of shooting and just physical development, like he's very slender. I saw him in person at the Utah Jazz game along with AJ DeBotsa, and he was kind of off to his own, sitting, watching, shoot around, and he's very slender. And I think he's got some twitch that probably in a straight line's faster than Yakachonis, but he doesn't have the guile or the physical development to create space and nudge players off of him. And he's going to be hounded by the likes of defenders that have played in the Big 12 for years. So I think he may struggle in the Big 12. His efficiency numbers may dip, but there could be scouts that salivate over the rare and unique passing profile that he possesses.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at him, and I know him a little bit, but you look at him, he has a baby face. He looks younger, and I think that he's similar to Ace, that he has a lot of room to grow and develop physically. While you look at even with Cooper, even though he's 17, he's pretty well built. You look at Dylan Harper, he's physically mature. I even feel like Yakachonis is physically mature for his size. I think once Egor puts on some weight, I think that due to his size, he offers a little bit more positional versatility. Maybe he is a full-time point guard. If not, then okay, then he's your 6'8", 6'9" secondary ball handler. So I think the positional versatility is in his favor. Before we get into the second segment, let's talk about FanDuel, because you can get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, which happens to be America's #1 sports book. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it is all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more. And it is on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit fanduel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Again, that's fanduel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's switch real fast to two prospects that I'm pretty high on that I also have in my top 10. Noa Essengue. I love Noah's game, and he is probably one of the more, I was stuck between saying more and most. I think he's one of the more unique prospects I've ever evaluated, simply because he's very productive, playing on a professional level. He's like 6'9", probably 190, rail thin, not a good shooter, not a good ball handler, not a really like polished offensive player, but he is still productive, gets to the foul line at an alarming rate, had 20 points, 8 rebounds against the Blazers. And the way I look at it, you can look at it two ways. You can look at it like, I mean, this guy doesn't have a skill set to hang his hat on, or my view is if he adds polish on the offensive end, improves his jumper, on top of his ability to get to the rim and be productive, I think he has a really high upside.
I agree with you. I mean, my notes are pretty basic on not being as familiar with him as I am with a lot of these collegiate players, but he's got a great body that I think is moldable. Like you said, he's rail thin, but I believe in the ability to develop, put on muscle, and be someone who has the ability to guard multiple positions, the ability to thrive, taking advantage of smaller defenders, and also bang with the big guys and rebound. I think he's got a really good feel for the game because, like you said, he's able to put up numbers without unbelievable polish. Like typically, young guys in these leagues only score points either on runouts or having tremendous polish. We talk about Yakachonis, we talk about Luka in years past. Those guys have a totally different skill set to hang their hat on, and they don't get sped up. He doesn't quite have that, but he's still able to put up points, and he's got a good feel for the game. I think he can play inside and out down the road, and it's funny. Like I talked to a friend a while ago about this. Is Saraf is more polished, but for some reason I'm more intrigued by Noah in terms of these foreign wings that are long and have interesting skill sets that you kind of would covet as an NBA executive, as a general manager. But this guy's just got stuff that makes me wonder in the same way that Tijan Salaun did. And Tijan went number 6. I had him number 7 on my board, I want to say, when it was all said and done. And I feel like Noa Essengue has a similar trajectory, and maybe he just fits the archetype that I typically lean towards.
Yeah. No, I think that, like I said, he has one of the higher upsides. I was at a game in Dubai where he had like 33 and 19. Just found ways to dominate that game with his motor, his athleticism, his nose for the basketball, and his ability to just get to the foul line and make people foul him. Talked to a scout recently, and he liked him, and he mentioned that the 20.8 rebound game that he had against the Blazers, he was like, that is the worst he's going to be. He said, even though Jeremy Grant didn't play and Ant Simons didn't play that game, he still put up 20 points against an NBA team as a 17-year-old. And he just felt like he's just not being talked about enough. All right, real quick, Derik Queen wraps up your top 10. Somewhat of a polarizing prospect. I've talked to some scouts that really like him. I've talked to some that don't think he's going to be a lottery pick just because of the optics. And then I've talked to one scout, and I wrote about it in my newsletter, and it's probably a little bit before your time. He compared Derik Queen to Derek Character, who was a very highly touted player coming out of high school, just had a cup of tea in the NBA. But what are your thoughts on Derik Queen?
I am a little worried about having him in my top 10. I'll readily admit that. There's a chance I see him slipping due to athletic limitations, but Derik Queen's extremely productive. I've liked him every time I've ever seen him play at Montverde as well, and obviously they had a great team. Like all their guys are thriving. But he and Flagg were the two that stood out to me on that Montverde team the most. And now you go to Maryland and introduce yourself with the 2020 game. Then you go play against elite competition in the front court in various games, and you outshine a lot of really good players. He played Eric Dixon, and his team won the game, and Dixon's a very good player at Villanova. He played against Trey Kaufman-Renn at Purdue and was the best front court player in that game despite losing to Purdue. What I like about him is, despite his athletic limitations, he's able to be productive through his skill set, and his size allows him to not be physically overmatched, despite what I spoke of in terms of athletic limitations. Like, he's the type of guy who can't jump over a phone book. That's one of my favorite old expressions. Like, he can't jump over a phone book, but he's going to carve out his space and he's going to score. And I think he actually will develop into being able to shoot the ball. I think he's got good touch, and I also really love the vision. And we talked about this in a previous episode. He's got the offensive hub capacity, and that's becoming one of the more and more prioritized things in basketball. As you see, Jokic, of course, is the perfect example of this, but at a lesser degree, Sabonis, Alperen Şengün, all of these guys who are not super athletic but are super savvy playmakers and use their body to create space as their offensive weapon along with their intellect. I think there is a pathway for success for Derik Queen, and he's an excellent rebounder. He's got a nose for the ball and great hands.
Yeah, I think he's going to be fine. I get the concern just because if he's a 5, he's not the typical 5 that the NBA is really like looking for right now. Usually it's like a low usage big that can anchor defense, protect the rim. And statistically, I mean, he's been good on the defensive end. But I think that, there's always going to be some concerns for bigs that are going to measure out at 6'9", 6'10", that aren't like playing above the rim. And if you have to rely heavily on skill, I do think the NBA is leaning towards skill. He may be a guy that is best if he's featured, and there may be some teams that won't feature him. And if he's not being featured, what's his role? Is he going to anchor the defense, or is he going to space the floor? So I do think it's a little bit tricky with Derik Queen, but I would take him. I think it's going to be a smart team that takes him, and I think that he is going to be productive because there's so many things that he does well. Very underrated passer. I think the shooting is going to come along, but I could actually see someone who has shown less skill, like an Asa Newell or even a Khaman Maluach, going ahead of him because it's a easier fit in a sense. All right, before we get into the last segment, I want to talk to you about Robinhood Gold, because with Robinhood Gold, you do not need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and the perks that are usually reserved for the high society. Now, a resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth, and these generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing is risky, and rates may change, and gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. All right, next, let's talk about Rocket Money. I have a question for you. Has Rocket Money helped you find any subscriptions that you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That has definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was paying for, and Rocket Money made it easy to track them down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. If you're not familiar with it, Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending, and it helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together, and it is all in one place. So whether it is subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals that you want to hit this year, Rocket Money has over 5 million users, and it has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions and saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, I use Rocket Money. Funny story. My wife wanted to talk about our finances and the budget, and she said she needed a couple of days to figure hers out. And she was very impressed that I had all of my budget and my spending already handy. And she thought that I was, very responsible and keeping track of everything. But I had to explain to her that I was just using Rocket Money. And every time I used my debit card, everything was tracked. So if you want to cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money, go to rocketmoney.com/locked on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked on. Again, rocketmoney.com/locked on.
Yeah, I thought about putting Maluach at my number 10. He's a guy that I'm not giving up on. It's just he looks worse in comparison because of how good Malik Brown is for that Duke team defensively for the right here, right now. And it's hard for me to say, well, the guy's hardly playing, like I got to keep in my top 10. But he's definitely a guy whose skill set I think is extremely valuable, and he would have been my first one left off my top 10. So I guess number 11 is Khaman Maluach if you want that extra little tidbit of information.
I think he'll look better in the NBA. A very scaled down role. It's like when I would evaluate some bigs in Europe, I would see a guy, see how much bigger and more athletic he is than some of the other players, but then just really be off of him in a sense because I see that he can't create his own shots. And like the player that comes to mind is James Nagy. I think he was like the 31st or 32nd pick a couple years ago. Did not like him. He would put up solid numbers because he was just bigger, stronger than everyone else. But then once he got moved up to Barcelona's senior team, then he had a very simplified role, run the floor, block shots, and they had the playmakers to find him on rolls. He looked like a totally different player, which was a big reason why he ended up being selected. And so I think Maluach is going to have a similar situation. I think he's going to look better in the NBA. I don't think Duke's point guard play has helped him out a lot. He's still shooting 77% from the floor, but I think better spacing, NBA level playmakers. I use this as an example. I mean, there's only a few of these guys in the NBA, but a Khaman Maluach playing next to James Harden is going to look good. Playing next to Luka Doncic or Trae Young, he's going to look good. Now, again, I know those guys are outliers, but I think that there are some point guards that can really maximize his skill set a lot better than what he has at Duke.
I mean, I think Ivica Zubac is a really good player, but playing next to James Harden, he looks really, really good. And
he's not even above the rim. Like James prefers a guy that, is a vertical lob threat.
Absolutely. And it's like Mike Conley talked about this, and I'm going to bring this to the Jazz momentarily, is Mike Conley talked about how he was used to Marc Gasol and what he did super well is carving out space. But when he went and started playing with Rudy, he didn't know how to throw lobs. So he asked Greg Oden, one of his best friends, to just catch lobs for him all summer. And then the next year, Rudy, everyone talked about vertical lob threat. Like that was the catchphrase, the buzzword, vertical lob threat, a spacer vertically, someone who's can put a team into a blender is the word that all the Jazz people talked about. It's like, you put them in a blender because they have to tag Rudy and everyone's open. Like Maluach can do that in spades and protect the rim and do all these things. And not to mention, we saw him at 18 years old just drain a face-up jumper in Anthony Davis's face in the Olympics. Like, this guy has touch as well. So I think he's a guy that I believe will be good. It's just hard to say from what I'm watching right now that it's inspiring that much faith. It's just from prior faith.
Well, that wraps up this second episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast and Leafs Top 10. Once again, thank you for making this your first, or in this case, your second listen of the day. Again, check out the Locked On newsletter at lockedondaily.com. Once again, it's Rafael Barlowe and Leif Thulin, and we are out of here.